Hello everyone and welcome to the Sathir Dance Podcast. In today's episode, we'll briefly explore the 19th century Seraglios of the Tanjore kings and the remarkable women who lived within them. In the 1990s, during my research on Princess Vijayā Mohana Muktamba, the youngest daughter of the last Tanjore Mahārājah, Śivājī, I encountered records that revealed the complex status these women held. The Seraglios were uniquely designed mini palaces that housed the Mahārājah's secondary wives, also known as sword wives, women of a distinct morganatic status. Unlike the queens, these secondary wives had no claim to royal titles or inheritance, yet they held a significant place within the palace's ecosystem. Mahārājah Serfoji is often celebrated as an enlightened ruler who embraced modernity. However, it is just as important to recognize that while he promoted learning and the arts, he also upheld the rigid social structures of his time, maintaining hierarchies based on caste and gender. The Seraglios were part of this broader framework of control. Serfoji's selective engagement with Enlightenment ideals, especially in his social policies and regulation of women's lives, reflects an ongoing negotiation between tradition and colonial rule, which has shaped how his legacy is remembered today. The details in this podcast are drawn from my essays. If you are interested in reading them, links are provided in the description below. When the British East India Company annexed the Tanjore kingdom after Śivājī died in 1855, his sword wives became central figures in legal battles over succession, pensions and inheritance, conflicts that spanned decades. But who were these sword wives? How did their lives intersect with the queens and the dancing girls of Tanjore? And what do their stories reveal about the intricate dynamics of a royal household? In the early years of his reign, Mahārājah Serfoji commissioned a sculptor to inscribe the lineage of his ancestors on the walls of the ancient Brihadishvara temple. These inscriptions trace the history of the Maratha kings of Tanjore, linking their lineage to the great Śivājī. The inscriptions, dating to the early 19th century, also provide some insight into the sword wives of the kings. The significance of sword marriages grew notably during Serfoji's reign. For the first time, secondary wives lived outside the main palace in a separate Seraglio. Serfoji's first sword wife was Muktambal. In 1796, before he became king, Serfoji met Muktambal and brought her to his palace. Their marriage faced opposition. Palace pundits said it went against the Shastras, and the East India Company saw it as unsuitable for a royal union. But Serfoji went ahead with the wedding, marrying Muktambal through a sword ceremony. This gave her a place in the palace, though not the status of a queen. Sadly, she passed away soon after giving birth to their second child. In her memory, Serfoji built the Muktambapuram Chatram in 1805. After this loss, he married two official queens, one in 1799 and another in 1801. In the early 1820s, Serfoji became the first Tanjore king to marry numerous sword wives and house them separately in his Seraglio, the Kalyāṇa Mahāl, located on the banks of the Kaveri river. This marked a departure from earlier practices where sword wives had lived alongside the queens within the main palace, their roles less formalized. By establishing the Kalyāṇa Mahāl, Serfoji created a distinct space for these women, reflecting the evolving dynamics of the royal household. At the time of Serfoji's death in 1832, 24 sword wives were still residing in his Seraglio. His son, Mahārājah Śivājī, would later expand this practice, building a new Seraglio that became even more prominent in the royal household. After his father, Mahārājah Śivājī continued the practice of maintaining Seraglios. In 1840, he built a new one, Vijayā Maṅgala Vilāsam Mahāl, just a short walk from the palace. By 1841, the Mahāl housed 5 sword wives. Over the next few years, their number grew rapidly. By 1847, it had reached 45, eventually exceeding 50. After Śivājī died in 1855, his Seraglio still housed 42 swart wives who bore him 6 sons and 11 daughters. Alongside his swart wives, Śivājī also contracted conventional royal marriages. Between 1818 and 1833, he married 3 queens. His reign also marked an extraordinary moment in royal marital history. On a single day in 1852, Śivājī married 17 women as queens, 9 in the morning and 8 in the evening. This grand ceremony underscored his power, but also hinted at the fragile future of the Tanjore dynasty. On the 29th of October 1855, Śivājī died without a male heir, whether direct, collateral, or adopted. As a result, his dominions passed to the East India Company. While his queens received pensions, his swart wives faced a much more uncertain future. Legal disputes over inheritance left many of them and their children in limbo. Understanding their uncertain status requires a closer look at the hierarchies of royal women within the palace. Broadly, there were 3 groups of women: the queens, the swart wives, and the dancing girls or devadasis. The roles of the latter 2 often overlapped, making their distinctions fluid and difficult to define. The Tanjore queens or Maharanis were the Mahārājah's principal wives. Theirs was a conventional marriage, involving the customary rituals and ceremonies typical of a Hindu wedding, where the Raja tied the thali around the bride's neck, signifying her status as a full wife. They held the highest rank, wore gold jewelry, and participated in official ceremonies. Although they lived in seclusion, following Gosha or Purda, they were the only women permitted to sit beside the king on the throne. They also enjoyed privileges such as an entourage of servants, inheritance rights, and royal funerals. The second group were the swart wives, a unique type of marriage between the Mahārājah and, for the most part, dancing girls who became part of the royal household through these unions. These marriages were marked by the tying of the thali to a swart instead of directly to the bride. The sword symbolized marital strength, and the ceremony itself was less elaborate than the weddings of queens. Swart wives wore only silver jewelry and had no inheritance rights. However, their role as permanent consorts distinguished them from ordinary concubines. After the ceremony, the swart wife entered the Seraglio, where she lived in seclusion, cut off from the outside world. She served as a private dancer, performing exclusively for the Mahārājah, the queens, and the princesses. Finally, the third group, the dancing girls, court or public performers, were celebrated for their artistry in dance, music, and poetry. These dancers performed in several locations associated with the Tanjore court: the palace darbars, the Huzur Natyasala Mahal, and within the Seraglios, where dance performances had a distinct character. In the palace darbar, a dancer and her all-male musical ensemble would typically perform for the king and his guests, which included court officials, ministers, British officers, and others. These audiences were almost exclusively male. However, inside the Seraglio, the dynamic was entirely different. Except for the king, male outsiders were strictly prohibited from entering the Seraglio. Even the building itself was guarded by female sentries. In this private female-dominated space, the dancers performed with an all-female orchestra, highlighting that these women were not just exceptional dancers, they were also highly skilled as singers and musicians, often playing instruments themselves when required. Interestingly, many dancing girls aspired to become swart wives. A swart marriage to the Mahārājah offered them security and a permanent place in the royal household during his lifetime, even if it meant sacrificing their public lives. This aspiration highlights the delicate balance they navigated between art, autonomy, and survival. The legal complexities surrounding these women became apparent following Mahārājah Śivājī's death. As I have mentioned earlier, Śivājī left no legitimate male heir, leading to the annexation of his kingdom by the East India Company. The Dowager Queen Kamakshi Bai emerged as a prominent figure during this turbulent period. Her efforts to protect the royal family's dignity and secure rights for the queens were notable. However, the swart wives remained in a precarious position. Acknowledged as members of the royal household, they were nonetheless denied inheritance rights and excluded from property claims. For the children of the swart wives, the lack of legitimacy proved to be a significant barrier. Excluded from royal succession and denied access to the family's wealth, they were relegated to minor roles within the palace, their futures uncertain. Legal disputes over the legitimacy of the swart wives and their rightful share of the estate persisted into the early 20th century. The final ruling acknowledged that the Tanjore Rajas had admitted women into the Seraglio as swart wives. While their children were deemed illegitimate and inferior in status, legal consensus held that they were nevertheless entitled to a share of the estate. The legal battles over the estate underscore a deeper issue, the erasure of the swart wives and their children from historical memory. While the queens of Tanjore are remembered for their resilience, the swart wives remain a forgotten part of the royal narrative. By the early 20th century, Mahārājah Śivājī's last surviving swart wife, Tanjore Dharmavali Bai Saheba, passed away, outliving Śivājī by 50 years, symbolizing the final chapter in the story of the Seraglio wives. Although the presence of the swart wives faded, the artistic traditions upheld by these women, albeit only in private settings, along with those of the public dancing girls, endured. Bharatanatyam, deeply rooted in the courtly traditions of Tanjore, remains a testament to their cultural legacy. Without falling into the historian's fallacy, one must ask why Serfoji and Sivaji maintained dozens of swart wives alongside their official numerous queens. Swart marriages did not elevate dancing girls to the status of principal queens. Instead, these women entered the Seraglio after marriage and disappeared from public life. Their children were excluded from royal succession, and the kings made no provisions to secure their future. In an upcoming episode, I will delve deeper into the purpose of the Seraglios under the last two Tanjore kings, focusing on the caste hierarchies and patriarchal norms that shaped the lives of the women within them. And that concludes this episode of the Sathir Dance Podcast. For those interested in reading my full essays, links are provided in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Join us next time, and goodbye for now.